What's up, everybody? We're going to do this review a little bit differently because the show, it's not like a continuous one-story season. It is an anthology. Each episode is a different story with different actors, with different directors, different writers. Well, not necessarily different writers, but for the most part, different cast, different crew. Each episode is introduced first by the man himself, Guillermo del Toro, and it's just great to hear him talk about the episode itself without giving anything away before it even starts. And he introduces not only the title, but the director, which I think is great. So what we're going to do here, and I know this is like my longest cold opening ever before we get to the intro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each episode a little bit. Each episode is going to get a grade, and then in the end, I'm going to do an overview and give an overall rating. Sound good? Good? Let's get to it. So the first episode of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities was called Lot 36. It starred Tim Blake Nelson, who, phenomenal actor. He does not always get the credit he deserves, I think. He plays a dick. Like his character is a total dick, but Nelson is fantastic at it. Basically, his character buys storage units and then he sells them for profit. And the story kicks off with he buys the storage unit of a former Nazi. He doesn't know that when he buys it. We find out a little bit later, but this dude's a former Nazi who gets into the occult. I think this episode, Lot 36, is well done. It's creepy. The cinematography is fantastic because it is overall very small spaces. The director, the cinematographer, they knew what they were doing. They pulled it off. The practical effects and the CGI for the big reveal of the monster, I thought it looked great as well. But I feel like they could have done more. I know they only had a limited amount of time, but I feel like they could have done more. I give Lot 36 a B. Episode 2 is called Graveyard Rats. Stars David Hewlett as a caretaker of a graveyard, a cemetery, and he takes to grave robbing the graves he's supposed to be looking after to pay his debts. Now, as you can probably tell from the title of it, this does very much involve rats. There is a disturbing scene which features what is basically a shower of rats. Like, I got creeped the fuck out. Just the thought of hundreds of them just dropping onto me fucking gives me the chills, man. The practical effects used in this episode, I think, were fantastic, but there was the CGI, which not so much. It could have been because of the fast-paced movements of the particular creature, but the CGI, unfortunately, it did not work. This episode also had a lot of small spaces in it, and I thought there was great use of close-ups by the director, and the cinematography in the small spaces was also very well done. This one, I think David Hewlett maybe a little overacted. Kind of hard to tell. That might have been the point, seeing as, you know, he's being attacked by rats a lot of the time. Well, not a lot of the time, but he's being attacked by rats. So, I mean, maybe the point was to overreact and overact. But that and the shitty CGI, I give Graveyard Rats a B-. So the next episode is called The Autopsy, and it stars F. Murray Abraham, the legendary F. Murray Abraham. The man is 80 plus years old, and he still commands attention when he's on screen. So basically, there's an explosion in a mine. It kills 10 miners, unfortunately, but there's suspicious circumstances about it. Abraham plays a coroner, so he's called in to do autopsies to see what the potential cause of death is. Was it an explosion? Was it the crush of the fucking like falling cave? It's connected to a meteor shower and other missing persons cases. And this episode, there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of intrigue. There is great attention to detail in the autopsies. Like, there's close-ups of almost everything Abraham is doing from slicing open the chest to cutting off the fucking breastplate. It's incredibly detailed. This episode also features Luke Roberts as one of the miners, and I won't get into details on exactly what happens with him, but I will say he is creepy as fuck. Like, he's great in this role. This episode has absolutely phenomenal practical effects. Absolutely amazing. Like I said, the attention to detail in the autopsies alone is just up for praise. And the little bit of CGI that it features for the creature itself, great. It's like, it's weird because like the CGI is great on some episodes, but not on other episodes. But I honestly think the Autopsy could go down as a horror classic, as a short horror classic. I give the Autopsy an A. The next episode is entitled The Outside, and it stars Kate Micucci and Martin Starr, who are primarily known as comedians. Micucci, she is one of the weird girls. She doesn't fit in. And that's the overarching theme of this episode, is fitting in, being one of the girls, being one of the pact, so to speak. And to do that, her character uses a cream that she is horribly allergic to. But ultimately, the monster, the creature in this episode is not a monster. It's not a creature. It's very simply us. It's our own minds. That is the monster in what it can do to us. Because throughout the episode, Starr, who plays Micucci's husband, he's telling her, you're perfect the way you are. You're beautiful on the inside. You're beautiful on the outside. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to change anything. But in her head, she's one of the weird girls. She's not perfect. She has to change. And that right there is the horror of it. And it's a different kind of horror. So I applaud The Outside for that. It is well made. It's well acted. It's got a good use of makeup. The little bit of CGI they use, it's pretty decent. But overall, this episode is unfortunately kind of boring. I give The Outside a C. Next up is Pickman's Model, which stars Ben Barnes and Crispin Glover, who I have not seen him in anything significant since probably Alice in Wonderland, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. So Pickman's Model follows the story of two artists. Well, multiple artists really, but the two main characters played by Barnes and Glover, they're both artists. One kind of traditional artist, he does portraits, and the other, Glover, he is into the macabre. This episode it's mysterious, it's creepy. Crispin Glover is fucking creepy as hell. He is amazing. Like, that man needs to be in more horror. I think Barnes is also great. The show is beautifully shot. It keeps you interested and intrigued from the start. It keeps you at the edge of your seat, wanting to wonder what the fuck is going to happen next. It's got some good practical effects, some okay special effects, and it's got an ending that's actually pretty goddamn shocking. I give Pickman's Model a B+. Episode 6 is Dreams in the Witch House, starring Rupert Grint, who best known as Ron Weasley in Harry Potter. Grint plays a character who he is desperate to find the spirit of his twin sister, who died at a very early age when they were kids, and he's been searching ever since. So this horror is ghosts, the paranormal, witchcraft, as well as other dimensions, and, not heaven, not hell, but limbo. I think this episode is well made, even well acted, even though it does feel like Grint does overact a bit at times. Sometimes the story is very interesting, but other times you're just kind of like, meh, because it's bland. The practical effects to create the main creature, which is a witch, because I obviously mentioned witchcraft, she looks amazing. Freaky as fuck, man. CGI is pretty decent, but because the story is kind of bland and a little bit boring at times, I do give Dreams in the Witch House a C. The viewing stars the legendary Peter Weller, who's best known as the original RoboCop. It also features comedian Eric Andre, Sophia Boutella, Charlene Yee, and Steve Agee, who probably best known as the motion capture actor for King Shark in the Suicide Squad. So it's actually a pretty good cast, but all this particular episode is these characters, and they're literally just sitting around in a circle talking and doing drugs. And it's not until the last 15 minutes of this episode that we see what Peter Weller's character brought them all in for. But unfortunately, by then, I've completely lost interest. Now, I think this particular horror is aliens, so it's a bit sci-fi, but it could also be something completely different, because it's, I don't know, the episode's kind of confusing, because again, nothing really happens until the last 15 minutes of the episode. I mean, it's decently acted. Everybody in it is overall pretty good, but it's got subpar effects, and the story itself is pretty head-scratching, and it leaves you wondering what the fuck happened. I give the viewing a D. The Murmuring features Andrew Lincoln from The Walking Dead and Essie Davis, who I would think is best known for playing the mother in The Babadook. They both play bird experts, specifically on the Dunlin, which is, if you ever see like a shitload of birds and they're doing like formations in the sky, that's the Dunlin. I didn't know that, so I actually learned something. Davis's character becomes completely obsessed with the people who used to live in the house that they're staying in to study the birds, and she's doing that in place of the loss of her own child. So this episode features ghosts, but I feel like the real horror of this particular episode is grief. Which grief can be very, very powerful. Grief can be very scary. But unfortunately, the story itself, the way it's executed, I feel like it wasn't very interesting. It's acted fantastically. You know, Lincoln and Davis, they're both amazing. But the story itself is just kind of eh. I give The Murmuring a C. At the end of the day, Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. It's really a mixed bag. Overall, each episode is well acted. Everybody involved is good to great. You know, some of the stories are fantastic. Some of them fall flat. The effects, like the practical effects, all look fantastic. But some of the CGI is really questionable. Without a shadow of a doubt, the best episode is the Autopsy with F. Murray Abraham. And the worst is The Viewing. But other than The Viewing, the lowest grade I gave anything was a C, which is still pretty good. Most everything else was a B, except for the Autopsy, which was an A. So I would really like to see the Cabinet of Curiosities continue. It'd be great to see, you know, different directors and writers and actors all bringing the new horror stories to life. It would be great, though, for Del Toro to direct an episode if they do a second season. So it would be great to see the man himself doing what he does best. But overall, I think Del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities is an overall good show. I think I said overall twice. So I do recommend it if you haven't already been watching it day to day as the episodes were released. I think it's worth a watch. I give Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities a B.
Did you enjoy the review? Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to get notified when more reviews go live. Feel free to leave a comment to discuss your thoughts on the movie or show, and I will see you next time.